How did you feel with the hire Billy Donovan? Before they hired Billy Donovan, who were the guys that you wanted to take that seat from Jim Boylan?
Yeah, I mean, I think we were mostly looking at would-be first-time head coach candidates, whether it be Steven Silas, Wes Unseld Jr., Dan Craig, plenty of people who had impressive resumes in their other stops in the NBA as people who started in video rooms and people who started in development and then worked their way to, seats on assistant coaching positions. And I was okay with the path of, all right, we're going to give a guy a first-time head coaching opportunity as long as they come from a respectable program and have some chops. And there are other people in the league who say this person deserves this opportunity. And it's not just the Bulls being the Bulls, where it's just like, hey, let's throw a dart. Hey, let's call Iowa and see who picks up. Like I was ready to make my peace with whoever they settled on. And then it was a remarkably pleasant surprise to me to hear Donovan be the name that was called, because if you remember, his name was floated, and I believe by Woj, like the most trustworthy of all sources, as the Bulls are expected to have some interest. But it was like one tweet, and we never heard anything about it again. And Bulls fans were like, "Oh my God, who are we going to get?" And I always was kind of wondering in the back of my mind, I was like, maybe they're going after Donovan and just being very, very quiet about it. And that turned out to be exactly the case. Look, does Donovan have certain flaws in his resume so far as a head coach in the NBA? Sure. Failing to get out of the first round despite some Hall of Fame type talent, whether you're talking about, the last season of KD being there, Westbrook, Paul George. The most credit he gets, and rightfully so, is for what he did this past season with CP3 and a gang of misfits. Nobody predicted them to make the playoffs in a stacked Western Conference, let alone make the 5th seed. Right. A huge accomplishment there. Does he have, some work to do on making in-game adjustments and matchup adjustments and things like that? Sure. He's also a guy who has a .600 winning percentage in the Western Conference over the last 5 years. Oh, and 2 titles back-to-back in the NCAA, which hasn't been done since hasn't been done since. Dude has mad credentials compared to Jim Bleepin Boylan. I'm ecstatic.
So in that, I want to transition to the front office, because that had to be something that you look upon this front office as doing a really good job going out and getting someone who had actually been through the fires. So I know we can't see it. We don't know everything because the season hasn't unfolded and the league came to a stop, and really the Bulls didn't start playing in the bubble. They didn't get the opportunity to play in the bubble. But when you're looking at Arturas Karnisovas and Mark Eversley, how do you feel about this front office moving forward? And is it a situation that the last relationship was so bad you'll take anything right now?
Right. I think, and that was what was so funny to me, was watching Bulls fans react to Jim Boylan still being around and still not being fired yet. And everybody was like, oh my God, they're going to bring him back. And then there were all these other speculative columns written by Bulls beat writers being like, well, they might bring Jim back because of this. And Jerry Reinsdorf just mentioned about how much money he's losing between his Bulls and his White Sox. And we're in a pandemic, and they might be looking for cost-cutting solutions everywhere. And maybe that includes bringing Jim back. And I was sitting here saying, ain't no way any of that makes any lick of sense.
Right.
AK was brought in to create organizational change. Why would they bring him here if they insisted on shoving Jim Boylan down his throat? It made no sense. So AK was just doing his due diligence, and he was being respectful to his new boss's ownership, who requested him to keep an open mind about Jim Boylan. So we all waited impatiently. And as I expected, the news came, and AK fired Jim because that was the right basketball decision. I feel great about this new front office. At first, I was a little bit worried when, we finally got rid of Gar, but, they're going to put John with a different title, senior basketball advisor, senior advisor to the right, whatever, and worrying about him still sticking his nose in the new front office's business. But we were told John is here if you need him. Otherwise, AK, it's your show to run. Hire who you want to hire. Fill out the front office, whatever way you want to do, and we will be here to support you. And our checkbook will be here to support you to make sure that that's doable. We have seen no evidence to the contrary so far, other than Bulls being impatient before firing Jim Boylan for a while there and freaking out when, again, like you were saying, we just have trust issues, right? It's like, we got cheated on, and as soon as we start dating somebody new, we're like, are they going to cheat on us too?
Please don't. Listen, the only bad part when it comes to Jerry is really what happened with this. All right.
Oh,
Listen,
oh.
we got Doug Collins, and it's even worse. I don't want to go there. We're having a great interview. I'm not going to bring us
I
down.
I heard something about Tony getting that DUI expunged today. What is there some
Well,
good news on that
actually,
front?
no, actually, what it is, they filed it in like the wrong county.
Oh,
So they dismissed it, but they're going to refile it. So
oh,
he
okay.
didn't get off just yet. He's
I
not off.
thought that was Jerry still calling in a few favors that he had left
Yeah,
somewhere.
yeah, take care of this, right? Exactly, exactly.
Oh,
Look, I want to talk
yeah.
to something near and dear to you before you get out of here. You did something that I'm sure a lot of people, even myself, would love to do, and to see you host Bulls Outsiders after the game and cut up, and you guys have for such a good time. How was that, and how did it come about? How did you guys come to NBC Sports Chicago, or did they come to you? How did that take place?
So actually, and yeah, just right out of the gate, it was an incredible experience. I never believed for a second that I was actually there. I was pinching myself the whole time. It was, such a wonderful opportunity. And the three of us, myself and my amazing co-stars, Big Dave and John, relished every second of it. It was actually a concept that was created by some people over at NBC Bay Area because the Warriors were so popular that it didn't matter how much content they would put out with the Warriors, it was never enough. And so they had a couple of people. One of them was, kind of like an up and coming beat writer. And then one of them was just somebody who had like a Warriors blog. And they started it as a Facebook Live show on the NBC Sports Bay Area Facebook page. And it garnered a pretty big following because Warriors fans were obsessed with this, dynasty team at the time. This started, 3 or 4 years ago when the Warriors were the thing in the NBA. And so it got so popular that they took it from being a Facebook Live show all the way to being their regional sports network cable show that they would do as a post-game show, in addition to some other digital media platforms. And so basically the big bosses at NBC Sports told their other regional sports networks, including Chicago, hey, if you have an NBA team as part of your coverage, check out this cool concept that the Warriors are doing called Warriors Outsiders. And if you want to do something similar with your team, go for it. And we'll support you, and you can make creative changes that you see fit. So that's how it started. And our executive producer, Kevin Anderson, who is just one of the nicest people in the world and one of the most talented people I've worked with in the sports media business, was put in charge to say, hey, find the correct people for this and run it. And that's how it started. He reached out to a handful of people that were just prominent follows on Bulls Twitter, people who had Bulls podcasts or Bulls blogs, people who were not quite media, but on the fringe of media, if that makes sense. And someone who could honestly fill the role of, I'm not media. I'm not in the inner circle. I am a fan. First and foremost, I am a fan. And we want to do a post-game show that is for the fans, by the fans. There was a lengthy audition and application process, including in-studio auditions, and the three people that they settled on were myself and John Sabine and Big Dave Watson, the three of whom we had never met before coming into those in-person auditions. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Most
people are shocked.
The over there. I didn't until you started saying this. I was like, he's trying to say that these guys didn't work together. That's crazy. Great job, man.
People are shocked when they hear that we had never met each other or known each other before coming into auditions for that show, because we are so lucky in that there are certain personality and experience overlaps between all three of us in different ways, where chemistry was just instantaneous. Like myself and John both had backgrounds in acting and live comedy, sketch comedy, improv comedy. And John still does a lot of that. Like he's a big guy at Second City and IO here in Chicago.
Okay.
I hung up my acting cleats to try to get into sports media about 5 or 6 years ago. So John and I had that in common, and certainly that comfortability of talking and being performative. And John and Big Dave bonded immediately over their mutual love for pro wrestling and WWE. And so it was like they were diehard NBA fans and Bulls fans, but also they had this other mutual interest that was like very, lovingly just their own. So it was like there was all this. And then, of course, Dave and myself, just lifelong Chicago sports fans who live, breathe, and eat and sleep Chicago sports. So there was mutual respect and mutual interest in all directions between the three of us. So that's why we were lucky that, as soon as they sat us down in front of a camera, our producer, Kevin Anderson, said, 2 minutes into the first time we put the three of you together at the table, we were like, yep, this is it. This is the show.
That's dope. Listen, so how you of course you have people, you engage with people on social media. How is it received? And I mean that outside of, and I'm not saying this because I didn't even check this out today. I was listening. The Marchi and Greco spat. It was good. That was good. Listen, I didn't even know you, but I was happy for you. All right.
Yeah.
I was happy. Did you end up going on like Waddle and Sylvie? Because I think I was listening that day and I was just happy. Like, that is so sweet that they get that Marchi, that happened and they get to go on there. But how was it received? And then tell me about the spat with the one great Gian Greco from that Channel 5 and Channel 7, as us kids can remember.
Yeah, I mean, especially for me and Dave, it was unbelievable to even think that Marchi and Greco would know who we are and that we existed. John's a transplant. He's originally from Dallas. He came to Chicago, like I want to say 10 or 12 years ago. So for him, Gian Greco didn't carry that same weight of me and Dave are Chicago kids. Let's classify. Dave's a Chicago kid. I'm a suburb kid. I'm not that cool. But even still, being a Chicago suburbs kid, like Gian Greco, it's like, dude, I remember watching him covering Michael Jordan's retirement in 1993 when I was 6 years old. Like, he has been that guy in Chicago sports broadcasting for so long. So to hear him kind of, slight us on the air on Waddle and Sylvie, a show that I've listened to for, a decade, I'm like, wow, I can't believe he knows who we are. Also, sounds like he's not a big fan of our content. So it just kind of snowballed. We had a show that night. The Bulls had a game that night after his appearance on Waddle and Sylvie, where he kind of, trashed us a little bit. So we responded mostly with praise and saying, dude, you're a legend. Thanks for even mentioning us on Chicago Sports Talk Radio.
Right.
And hey, we could learn a thing or two from you if you ever want to come by the show. We're still pretty new in this business. You're a legend. But we also got in some underhanded jabs about maybe the fact that he's nearing the twilight years of his career. And then, I hopped on Waddle and Sylvie for a quick second when they had Mark on, and he and I made peace and cracked a few jokes. But I think the most important thing that came out of that is a column I wrote for NBCSportsChicago.com. I was doing a weekly column this year called The Pecking Order, and most of it was just about Bulls stuff, my Bulls thoughts after the most recent week of Bulls basketball games. But I sat down and wrote this really long-winded, long-form, fleshed out thought, think piece on the changing world of Chicago sports media and sports media in general, and the fact that this was clearly a generational divide